Join me as I dive into the tricky world of triangulation in relationships and challenge myself to see if I can manipulate the dynamics around me without anyone noticing. Triangulation is a term that's often thrown around in the context of interpersonal relationships, but what does it really mean? And why is it so important to understand? In essence, triangulation refers to the process of involving a third person or entity in a conflict or issue between two individuals, often as a means of gaining power, control, or validation. When we triangulate, we create a situation where person A talks to person C about person B, rather than having a direct conversation with person B themselves. This can lead to misunderstandings, miscommunications, and a whole lot of conflict. Triangulation can be as subtle as gossiping about someone behind their back, or as overt as playing the victim to gain sympathy from others. The thing is, triangulation can be incredibly damaging to relationships, because it creates a sense of distrust and animosity between people. When we involve others in our conflicts, it's easy to lose sight of the original issue and start focusing on who's right or wrong, rather than finding a resolution. It's like adding fuel to a fire. It might provide a temporary sense of satisfaction or validation, but it ultimately makes the situation worse. We've all been guilty of triangulation at some point or another, whether it's venting to a friend about our partner or complaining to our family about a coworker. But the problem is, triangulation can become a habitual way of dealing with conflicts, and that's when it starts to wreak havoc on our relationships. Triangulation can take many forms. It can be a passive-aggressive comment, a whispered secret, or even a public social media post. The common thread is that it involves bringing someone else into the mix, often as a way of manipulating the situation or gaining the upper hand. For example, let's say you're having a disagreement with your partner and you decide to confide in a mutual friend about the issue. On the surface, it might seem like you're just looking for advice or support, but what you're really doing is triangulating the situation. You're involving a third person in your conflict, and that can create a whole new level of tension and drama. Another example is when you're dealing with a difficult coworker and you start talking about them behind their back with your colleagues. You might think you're just venting or commiserating, but what you're really doing is triangulating the situation. You're involving others in your conflict, and that can create a toxic work environment. Triangulation can also have deeper psychological implications. When we triangulate, we're often trying to avoid dealing with our own emotions or taking responsibility for our actions. We might feel like we're not good enough, or that we're in the wrong, so we bring someone else into the mix to validate our feelings or take our side. Recognizing triangulation is incredibly empowering because it allows us to take responsibility for our actions and communicate more effectively. When we stop involving others in our conflicts, we're forced to deal with the issue head-on, rather than relying on third parties to validate our feelings or take our side. By being more mindful of triangulation, we can start to break down the patterns and habits that are holding us back in our relationships. We can learn to communicate more directly and honestly, rather than relying on gossip or manipulation to get what we want. In conclusion, triangulation is a complex and subtle phenomenon that can have a profound impact on our relationships. By understanding its forms and implications, we can start to navigate conflicts in a more healthy and constructive way. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to share your own experiences with triangulation in the comments below. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more content on relationship dynamics and personal growth.